Hi, I'm Zaine from Beaton Firearms, and today I'd just like to show you how to dismantle and put back a Weatherby Vanguard. A lot of bolt action rifles are very similar in the way that they come apart and go back together, but they've all got slight little intricacies which make them different to each other, and slightly different tooling as well. Now, like I said, this is a Weatherby Vanguard. Now, Weatherby Vanguards are very similar to a Howler, or if you've got an older model rifle like a CMC, they'll be the same as that. So if you've got one of them, this is the demonstration for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull the gun right apart, probably not take the firing pin mechanism apart, but take everything else apart, and then we'll put it all back together, and we'll have some little checks and balances in there to make sure that it goes back together correctly. So now I'll just briefly run through the tools that I've got. Now what you're going to need is you're going to need obviously some oil and some rag for the oil. The other things that you're going to need are a little plastic hammer is quite handy to have. So you're going to need a 3mm Allen key. You're also going to need a Torx drive, a number 30 Torx drive to take the floor plate out. A screwdriver with quite a thin blade piece on the end of it. And also another thing that's handy to have is a Torx driver of some sort. So the wheeler fat wrench is what I've got here. And then just some dry rag. So keep dry and oily rag separate because they're used for different things. So the first thing that we're going to do is make sure that obviously the gun is unloaded. So make sure you look down into the chamber and feel in the chamber to make sure there's nothing in there, nothing in the magazine. Take the bolt out. So now obviously you're working with a firearm that's unloaded. It's completely safe, there's nothing that can go wrong, but it's a good idea to wear glasses because there's obviously oils and solvents and stuff you don't want to get in your eyes. We're also dealing with springs, and springs obviously can throw parts and end up in your face, in your eyes and that sort of stuff, so glasses are not a bad idea. So just take the bolt out and just set it aside, and we'll deal with that one in a sec. Next thing, turn the gun over. On the bottom, you've got two main screws which hold the floor plate and the action together and squash the stock in between. So we want to remove that first. So take your Torx driver and loosen off the two screws. Now as the screws come loose, the action is going to fall out of the stock, so make sure you hold it as you do it. So that's the two screws undone. Note the short one is in the front and the long one is the rear. Take the floor plate out as well. And then inside there is a steel magazine box. Pull that out and leave that separate as well. And now this action and the stock will come apart. Set the stock aside. Now we're just working on the action. So when you pull it apart, you'll probably note that there's a degree of stuff that's built up around the action that's gotten inside the stock. There'll also be a measure of oil and whatnot, and we'll need to get that out before we screw it back together. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the trigger out. So take your number 3 Allen key, and there's just a single screw here on the trigger that you need to remove, and the trigger will come out. On earlier model guns, it was, at one stage it was a flathead, and then it was a Phillips screwdriver, but they come out in exactly the same manner. That removes. The screw comes out of the body, and that should trigger out as well. The last part on the action that you can remove is the bolt stop, which is on the side here. So it's quite common for these bolt stops to break, especially if you're quite rough with the firearm. So this bolt stop, you need to know how to get it out. So it's just a straight screwdriver. It's quite a thin blade that you'll need for this. The slot's only not very wide. And then you just take that screw out. Now be careful, hold the bolt stop as you do it. Now as we've got it apart, we're going to give it a quick wipe over with some oil. It's also to take our fingerprint marks and whatnot. Now, we're going to put it back together. Oh, and before we do that, we're going to pull the bolt apart. So this is the bolt out of the gun. So you've lifted the bolt handle, taken it out. The bolt is now in a cocked position. So in order to take the firing pin mechanism out of this to clean it, it's actually quite easy. So if you imagine you're putting the bolt handle down, that silver cocking piece would come down into this little reduced part in there. So the cocking length there. So it would actually go down into there when it was fired, and it was allow the firing pin to come forward. To take it apart, you rotate the bolt head, the bolt shroud in the opposite direction. So I'm going to hold onto the bolt handle and I'm going to push the bolt shroud in the opposite direction. It takes a little bit of pressure to do it, but I've rotated the bolt shroud around, and just keep rotating it around until it pops out, like that. And that allows you to remove the firing pin mechanism from the bolt. So that's the bolt with all the firing pin and everything removed. You can clean that out with Shellite, white spirit, something like that. And to reassemble, it's just the opposite. So you've got this little lug here on the bolt. You want to line that up with the recess, which is inside the bolt, the back of the bolt. You just push that into there. It should drop down. Then you want to push the bolt shroud together and the bolt body together, and then rotate back to the position that allows you to put it back in the gun. Okay, so that's how the bolt comes apart. So the bolt body, you want to wipe the bolt body over with oil. You want to make sure there's oil all over the bolt body, the bolt shroud, that sort of stuff. You would put some grease on the back of the lugs to stop the lugs from galling. So a bit of grease there isn't a bad idea, but you want to make sure there is no oil on the face of the bolt, and that's where your dry bit of rag comes in. So with a dry bit of rag, you want to make sure that you wipe the bolt face, that it's free of dirt, grime, but no oil either. To put the bolt stop in, just need to make sure that the spring goes in the rear first, and then the stop goes in behind that. A little bit of oil. Stop comes up. Now you'll actually have to hold the stop into place under spring pressure when you put the screw in, because the screw hole won't line up. So you hold it up, drop the screw in, get it started, and then screw it up. But you'll notice that the screw has a little step on it at the top, and that's so the bolt stop doesn't run on the thread, it runs on the reduced section. So you want to hold the bolt stop up a little bit, I'll back it off a bit. There we go. And that allows you to screw it up the last little bit. This screw needs to be kept tight or it'll break. That's the bolt stop back in. Put the trigger back in. Just drop the trigger on there. Oil everything as you put it back together. Anywhere that you've had your fingers. That's the one up. Now, we're almost ready to put it back in the stock. Make sure there's just a film of oil over the metalwork underneath the stock. Not too much. You don't want oil building up anywhere. Just a film, just to stop any fingerprint marks from rusting the metalwork. You might even wipe it over with an oily rag and then wipe it over with a dry rag just to get rid of the excess. Because you don't want any excess, because that's going to destroy your bedding. And same, when you go to put the stock back on, get your dry rag and make sure anywhere where there's any oil that you remove that out of the stock, because that'll upset your bedding. Okay, now before we put the stock back on, we need to put the magazine box back in the gun. That's what this is. So again, a little bit of oil. Now the magazine box is split. You need to squeeze the back together before you put it in the stock. Always remember this little cutout here goes to the front, goes in the action. You should have, the bottom of the magazine box should be flat. So put it in at the front, squeeze it together at the back, push it in at the back, and make sure it stays down. Make sure it's not going to pop out. Then you put your stock back on over the top, and it should just drop down into the stock like that, and then your floor plate. Now be careful when you put your floor plate back in that it sits down on the floor plate. You can see here that it's proud all the way along here. It's not sitting on the box inside correctly, it's not over top of the box, it's sitting on the bolt. Just open this up. Inside there I can see that it's not bedding properly. So reach inside and just move the box around a little bit until that piece comes down. If the floor plate doesn't come down, there's nothing wrong with giving it just a light tap with a plastic hammer to get it to fit together correctly. Now you want to put your main screws back in. So I've got a Torx driver here, and it's got the correct size torque bit, and I'm just going to do the screws up with this. This is a Wheeler fat wrench, and it's a pretty good Torx driver. So you just want to do them up lightly for a start, and then torque them up to the correct torque settings. Everyone's got a different idea of what your torque settings should be. Personally, I like to have slightly more torque on the front than on the rear. So I like my rear one to be at around about 40 inch-pounds. Just do up the screws evenly for a start, and then do the rear one up. So that's 40 inch-pounds on the rear, 40 inch-pounds on the front, and then I'm going to bump that up a little bit. I'm going to put about 45 on the front. This is important for any rifle that isn't pillar bedded, to make sure you've got the correct torque settings on the screws. It's for both accuracy and performance, but repeatability as well. So you can take your gun apart, put it back together, and you know it's going to shoot the same. Put the floor plate back up, and then run your oily rag back over the metalwork to make sure you get rid of any fingerprint marks that might rust the metalwork on it. And that's it. That's how you pull apart and put back together a Weatherby Vanguard or a Hauer or a CMC.